I am Alina Vance, and I live in the heart of Austin, Texas, where the heat sits on your shoulders like a heavy wet blanket for 5 months out of the year. I am 25 years old now, but when I close my eyes, I can still feel the vibration of the old wooden floors in my childhood home shaking under the weight of my older sister Sarah. Sarah was 3 years older than me, and she was the storm that never ended in our house. Our father left before I could even remember the sound of his voice, and Sarah decided that his absence was my fault somehow. She took every bit of her rage and her sadness and her confusion, and she turned it into a weapon that she used against me every single day. I grew up in a world where I had to check the corners of every room before I entered them, and I had to listen to the rhythm of her breathing to know if it was safe to come out of my bedroom. My sister was not just mean, she was calculated and cruel in a way that most people do not understand. She would look at me with eyes that were as cold as a frozen lake in the middle of winter, and I knew that she wanted to see me suffer. One of the worst memories I have is from when we were younger and we had a golden retriever named Sparky. Sparky was my only friend in that house, and he would sit by my feet while I did my homework. One afternoon, Sarah saw me smiling while I was petting him, and she could not stand it. She walked over and grabbed him by the collar so hard that he whimpered, and she dragged him away from me just to show me that she could take away anything that brought me joy. That was the kind of person Sarah was, and that was the life I lived for years. By the time I was 12 years old, I had learned how to fight back with words, but I knew that I could never win a physical fight against her. She was bigger and stronger, and if I ever tried to push her back, she would scream so loud that our mother would come running, and I would always be the one who got in trouble. I realized that if I wanted to survive her, I had to be smarter than her. I had to find a way to hurt her that she would never see coming and that she could never prove was me. The opportunity finally came during a very hot week in July when Sarah was getting ready for a big country music concert at an outdoor venue just outside of the city. She had been talking about this concert for months because all of the popular girls from her high school were going together. This was her chance to feel like she belonged, and she was obsessed with looking perfect. That week, Sarah was more abusive than usual, and she was constantly picking fights and calling me names that I still do not like to repeat. Every time she yelled at me, I would pretend to be broken. I would let the tears well up in my eyes, and I would run to my room and slam the door while she laughed from the hallway. She loved the feeling of winning, and she loved seeing me cry because it made her feel powerful. She did not know that behind my closed bedroom door I was not crying at all. I was smiling because I was starting a plan that would change everything. I had found an old bottle of Wasp trap solution in the garage a few weeks earlier, and I had hidden it under my bed. The solution was a thick and sticky liquid that was designed to attract every wasp in the county with a scent that they found irresistible, but humans could barely smell at first. On Monday of that week, I started my work. Sarah and I shared a bathroom that sat between our two bedrooms, which people in Texas call a Jack and Jill bathroom. This gave me perfect access to all of her beauty products. While she was downstairs watching television and feeling proud of herself for making me cry, I crept into the bathroom. I took her expensive bottle of salon shampoo and her matching conditioner, and I brought them into my room. I used a small measuring spoon to add just under 1 tablespoon of the Wasp Trap liquid into each bottle. I shook them up until the solution was perfectly mixed in, and then I put them back on her shelf. I felt a tiny rush of adrenaline, but I knew I had to stay calm. On Tuesday, she was even meaner because she had a bad day at summer school, and she ended up cornering me in the kitchen. She pinched my arm so hard that it left a bruise, and she told me that I was a waste of space. Instead of fighting back, I just hung my head and walked away. That night, I added another dose of the wasp attractant to her hair products. Wednesday and Thursday were more of the same, and each time she lashed out at me, I added more of the chemical to her bottles. By Friday, the tension in the house was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Sarah was frantic about the concert, and she was rushing around trying to find the perfect outfit. When I tried to walk past her in the hallway, she actually tried to kick me down the stairs. I caught the railing just in time, but then she looked me dead in the eye and told me that she was going to find a knife and stab me if I ever got in her way again. That was the moment when the last bit of guilt I had disappeared. I realized that she was a true danger to my life, and I decided to go all the way. I had a small plastic bottle that I had been keeping in my room, and I had filled it with my own urine. I know that sounds disgusting, and it is, but I wanted her to be as miserable as she made me feel. I took that bottle and I left it on the windowsill in the direct Texas sun all day Friday, so it would get as warm and concentrated and smelly as possible. Right before she went to take her shower for the concert, I took her shampoo and conditioner one last time. I dumped out a good portion of the liquid and replaced it with the sun-warmed urine and the rest of the wasp trap solution. I shook it until it looked normal and I put it back. Sarah was running late because she couldn't find her boots and she was screaming at our mom to help her. She jumped into the shower and she was moving so fast that she didn't even notice the slight change in the texture of her soap. She scrubbed her hair and her body, and she came out smelling like a mix of cheap floral perfume and the chemicals I had hidden. She sprayed a massive amount of body spray over herself, which was a blessing, because it masked the smell of the urine just long enough for her to leave the house. As soon as her friends picked her up and the car pulled away, I went into the bathroom. I took the bottles of shampoo and conditioner, and I poured the rest of the tainted liquid down the toilet. I rinsed the bottles thoroughly, and then I filled them back up with some cheap dish soap and water and a little bit of my own shampoo to make them look full. I didn't want there to be any evidence left if she got suspicious. I spent the rest of the evening sitting on the porch and watching the sun go down over the Austin skyline. I felt a strange sense of peace that I had never felt before. I knew that something big was about to happen, and for the first time in my life, I was the one in control. The concert was at an outdoor park with lots of trees and open trash cans, which is the perfect environment for wasps in the middle of a Texas summer. Around 11 o'clock that night, I heard the sound of a car pulling into our driveway. I stayed in my room and listened. I heard the front door slam, and then I heard the sound of Sarah crying. It wasn't the fake crying it was the sound of someone who was truly humiliated and in pain. She ran up the stairs and into her room, and I could hear her sobbing through the walls. A few minutes later, I heard her talking to our mother. Sarah was hysterical, and she was saying that the entire night was a disaster. She said that for some reason, every wasp in the park seemed to be following her. She had been stung 5 times on her arms, and her neck and her friends had spent the whole night swatting bugs away from her. But the worst part for her was the social shame. She told our mother that her friends kept whispering and making faces, and eventually one of them asked her why she smelled like a wet dog and a portable toilet. Sarah didn't understand why the smell was coming from her, and she thought it was just the heat or the trash cans nearby, but the more she sweated, the worse the smell got. The wasp trap chemicals and the urine had reacted with her body heat and created a cloud of stench that followed her everywhere. Her friends ended up moving away from her in the crowd, and she spent the headline act sitting by herself in the back of the park because she was so embarrassed. She was so broken by the experience that she didn't even have the energy to yell at me for the next 2 weeks. She just stayed in her room and avoided everyone. It was the quietest 2 weeks of my entire life, and it felt like a dream. I never told a single soul what I did, and I never will until now. Looking back as a 25-year-old woman, I know that what I did was extreme, but I also know that I was a child who was being hunted in her own home. I was a little girl who was being told she would be stabbed by the person who was supposed to protect her. That revenge was the only thing that gave me a sense of safety, and it was the only thing that made Sarah realize that she wasn't untouchable. She is still a difficult person today, and we do not talk much, but she never tried to physically hurt me again after that summer. She always had a look of confusion in her eyes when she looked at me like she knew something had changed, but she couldn't figure out what it was. I carry that secret like a badge of honor, because I saved myself when no one else would. The memory of her coming home, covered in stings and smelling like a sewer, is something I will cherish for the rest of my life. It was the day the prey turned into the predator, and it was the day I finally won. I don't feel a single bit of guilt, and if I could go back in time and talk to my 12-year-old self, I would tell her to add an extra tablespoon of the wasp trap solution. People talk about how you should always be the bigger person, but sometimes the bigger person just gets stepped on. Sometimes you have to be the person who fights back in the shadows to survive the monsters in the light. The Austin heat still reminds me of that night, and every time I hear a country song on the radio, I can't help but smile a little bit. I think about the wasps, and I think about the smell, and I think about the look on her face, and I know that I did the right thing. It is funny how life works out because Sarah ended up moving away, and I stayed here in Texas and built a life for myself that is full of kindness and love. I make sure that I am never the kind of person she was, and I treat everyone with the respect that I never got from her. But I also know that deep down there is a part of me that is still that 12-year-old girl who knows how to handle a bully. I learned that you don't always have to be the strongest person in the room to win a fight, you just have to be the one who is willing to wait for the right moment. The revenge was sweet, and it was sticky, and it was exactly what she deserved. I am 25 years old now, and I have moved on from the trauma of my childhood, but I will never forget the lesson I learned that summer. You have to stand up for yourself, because if you don't then, the world will just keep pushing you down until there is nothing left. I am Alina Vance, and I am a survivor, and I am the girl who turned her abusive sister into a walking wasp trap. The house in Austin is gone now, and my mother has passed away, but the memory of that victory remains as clear as the blue Texas sky. I remember the way the light hit the bathroom mirror while I was mixing the chemicals, and I remember the feeling of the plastic bottle in my hand. It was a moment of pure clarity, and I knew that I was doing what I had to do. I often wonder if Sarah ever suspected me, but she was always too self-centered to think that I was capable of something so clever. She probably still thinks it was just bad luck or some kind of strange allergic reaction. I like it better that way because the best revenge is the kind that the victim never understands. It leaves them looking over their shoulder for the rest of their lives, wondering why the universe decided to